Here's Karoline Leavitt trying to clean up this whole mess with Pete Hegseth and his, those war crimes.
I have a statement to read for you here. President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have made it clear that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated.
Karoline Leavitt just threw this guy under the bus. Admiral Frank Bradley, reading from a statement prepared, I suppose, by this administration about the next lie that she's supposed to tell. So I remember that this story has been shifting. The blame has been shifting now, but before that, the existence of this whole thing has been shifting. So I think it's pretty obvious that enough reporters are in the room that are still reputable will ask her some follow-up questions.
So much of the concern from Democrats and Republicans is focused on the survivors. Why won't the administration either confirm or deny or reveal whether or not there were survivors after that initial first strike? And what imminent threat would two survivors pose who were clinging presumably to the wreckage of that boat?
Again, as I said, I think you guys are sort of not listening fully to the statement I've provided. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was totally destroyed and the threat to the narco-terrorists, to the United States, was eliminated. And for any further questions about his thinking, I would defer you to the Department of War. I obviously wasn't in the room.
I don't know if you guys heard me correctly. I'm reading from a statement that they told me not to waver from because the walls are closing in and the lies just don't really make much sense anymore. Didn't you guys hear me? Because when the question is about why is that they didn't confirm these survivors, that is before they murdered them as well, what does that have to do with Admiral Frank Bradley that you guys are throwing under the bus? You know what? It requires another question. Let's see if she's ready for this one.
So just to be clear, to clarify on Jackie and Gabe, did Admiral Bradley order that second strike because there were still survivors after the initial strike?
Again, as I read for you, Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law. He directed the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat of narco-terrorists to the United States was completely eliminated.
So was the initial order from Secretary Hegseth, everyone be killed, and did that come from President Trump?
I saw that quoted in a Washington Post story. I would reject that the Secretary of War ever said that. However, the president has made it quite clear that if narco-terrorists, again, are trafficking illegal drugs towards the United States, he has the authority to kill them. And that's what this administration is doing.
They just make things up. Again, the questions keep getting asked and the answers keep going back to the same prepared statement about what authority they have to violate rules of conflict, the Constitution, the normal military approach to all these things. Just because you say you have the right to break all these rules doesn't mean you just have the right to break all these rules. If I go up and steal a car and then get caught and then end up on trial, I don't get to say in front of the judge, you know what, I have the right to steal cars. That car was just sitting there looking all good and stuff. I've never driven a car that fast before. And I said, why not? I get to steal that car. I'm an American citizen, right? Just because I say things that violate the law doesn't mean that it doesn't violate the law anymore. Hey, check this out. This is the fourth time.
Following up on Gabe's question, you said that the follow-up strike was lawful. What law is it that allows no survivors?
The strike conducted on September 2nd was conducted in self-defense to protect Americans in vital United States interests. The strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict.
Under the law is where he can just go and then call for strikes. Now we've shifted to blaming this particular Admiral Frank Bradley. I wonder how Frank Bradley's feeling today, especially when it comes to following these orders from Pete Hegseth and then getting thrown under the bus, but then at the same time, somehow claiming that he followed all lawful procedures and processes that, rogue fascist administrations would be telling him to follow. Here's the Department of War. He says, let's make one thing crystal clear. Just because he said crystal clear, that means it's really going to be good. Admiral Mitch Bradley is an American hero, a true professional, and has my 100% support. I stand by him in the combat decisions he has made on the September 2nd mission and all others since. America is fortunate to have such men protecting us. When this Deputy Department of War says that we have the back of our warriors, we mean it, damn it. A presentation administration following behind this presentation president does nothing but boast, talk loudly, and then make declarations with terms like crystal clear and know this, we mean it when we say it. You know, stupid little phrases like that to make someone, I guess, believe the bullshit that they keep tossing around. So Pete Hegseth here is talking about how he's backing up Admiral Bradley. He's backing him up. That is at the same time kicking his ass under the bus. This is, I think, a really clear indication of who this Pete Hegseth and this entire administration is. While Pete Hegseth is talking about how he backs up his guy, this is a visual version of him talking trash to people on this, I guess it's flight deck, this aircraft carrier or so, about how much he supports them.
Happy Thanksgiving from me, the Secretary of War. Happy Thanksgiving from the President of the United States. Happy Thanksgiving from a grateful nation. I know all of you saw some of the news yesterday of 2 National Guardsmen targeted, ambushed in Washington, D.C. And they are a reminder, like you, of the bravery and the selflessness of Americans who put it all on the line in the prime of their life to do dangerous things on behalf of the American people, many of which they'll never meet, whether it's in our nation's capital, walking patrol, or whether it's in our nation's hemisphere, out at sea, interdicting cartels, defending the American people. We are grateful for you. What am I grateful for this Thanksgiving? The men and women that I'm looking at right now up here on this flight deck. The men and women I'm going to get to meet in just moments for a small Thanksgiving meal. The best of our country.
I think enough of these folks can recognize a fake ass when they see one. They see someone who's constantly acting. He totally pulled out his Fox News, Fox and Friends anchor persona every time he speaks because he thinks there's some kind of like charisma or some kind of like likability about his face when there's none at all. But he thinks this is something that's going to get them off the hook. But also think again about all of these service members, specifically now Admiral Bradley. Does Admiral Bradley feel protected by these guys? Does Admiral Bradley feel like maybe he should have, I know it happened before the video came out, but maybe heed those warnings from those 6 Democrats who were talking about not following unlawful orders. And when you follow unlawful orders, it's actually your duty to not follow those unlawful orders. And hair got pulled out and asked, wait, what unlawful orders are we talking about? We're talking about those unlawful orders that are being exposed right now, like 4 or 5 days after that video came out and the hair pulling all happened. We're seeing what those unlawful orders are that they kept saying, show them to me. Well, why don't you go ahead and show them to me? Since we're talking about the law, here's Ryan Goodman, a former general counsel in the Department of Defense. So he knows a couple things about law and order and the way that things are supposed to be done legally in the Department of Defense.
So it's pretty clear what Hegseth is saying. It's not me, it's him. How do you see this playing out?
I don't see it playing out well for Secretary Hegseth. Worst case scenario is what the Washington Post has reported and what CNN has reported, which is that Secretary Hegseth is the one who told Admiral Bradley that he wanted to ensure that there would be no survivors. That's the worst case scenario for him. The best case scenario for him is that he gave some instruction to Admiral Bradley, who then interpreted to mean the very same thing.
Right.
That would also hold Secretary Hegseth responsible. The U.S. military is, in fact,
well,
throwing
if he
people
said
out.
no survivors and there's a second strike, then that would be following his command, would it not?
It'd be following his command, and that command would be patently unlawful. It is the textbook example that the Department of Defense Law of War Manual gives for when somebody should refuse a clearly illegal order. The very example they give is firing on shipwrecked individuals.
It's almost like all those things that people who were protecting these guys and their unlawful bombings of people in the Caribbean on ships, boats, I'm sorry. It's almost like the people that recognized that understood how unlawful these things were. But instead, we had a debate over whether or not murdering people with absolutely zero due process was lawful or not. And according to Ryan Goodman, there's 2 bad scenarios for Pete Hegseth. Either you completely and directly asked for this by saying kill everyone, which is what's being reported, or you said, yeah, make sure it's done. And then Admiral Bradley took the baton from there and killed everyone and decided to have a second tap strike on these folks that were floating out in the water, half dead. Either way, it lands on Hegseth's desk. So maybe as this whole thing falls apart right in front of us, and we're looking at Hegseth with his probably the 12th to 15th corrupt violating thing that he's been doing. We just heard about Signalgate and the rest of these other few things. So now that this is happening, I feel like the folks who usually back him up aren't really here to back him up anymore. One of those folks is Britt Hume, old guy over on Fox News. He responded to Pete Hegseth, who had talked about this backing up of Admiral Bradley. And he said, Britt Hume said this, how to point the finger at someone while pretending to support them. That's a Fox News guy. I assume that's a Fox News guy who had some interactions with Pete Hegseth and knows him well enough to be able to come forward and say, Pete, stop it. Because that's exactly what it looks like. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it is. It's blaming someone else, as Donald Trump and this administration has always done. What kind of cowardly folks who run the country are willing to continue to turn around and put someone else in front of them to shield themselves from any kind of responsibility for things that they literally have been boasting about? Who wants to follow such weak, minuscule individuals? These are the worst people in the country, the most cowardly, fearful, but also violent and bloodthirsty people in the country. What's the good qualities about these folks?